This is me, racing out of bed for our front row seat to my life's work vanishing before my eyes. Linus Tech Tips, deleted. Tech Linked, toasted. Tech Quickie, gone. The good news is that if you're watching this, we're back online. The bad news is that this kind of attack has become so commonplace on YouTube that when we sat down to prepare this video, it took us less than 10 seconds to find a huge channel that was dealing with exactly the same thing in that moment. Let's talk then about the motive for these attacks, the process changes that we and YouTube need to make, and how we can all work together as a community to educate and protect each other from bad actors.
So that's a very important part, if you're going to start off with that, is cybersecurity has to be a community. Nobody can do it alone, right? If you're going to go at it alone, you will fail. And one, the community themselves needs to look at it from two perspectives. One, are you sharing enough data telemetry to make a difference, right? Meaning if you get hit this time, you've shared telemetry, and hopefully the next person doesn't get hit. With, let's just say there's a piece of malware out there. Number two, I think the community themselves need to be very vocal in pushback to get real change to happen. And that's probably what's going to need to be more done here, is enough community people discussing the problem and giving ideas and ultimately finding a way to get these type of fixes added to YouTube to prevent these things if it is happening as often as it is being said, right? So that's the way to look at this from a community perspective. Start with getting somebody to fix and improve what's going on in the situation.
Oh, and to tell you about our sponsor, dbrand. Oh God, not dbrand. Today, really? Oh, actually no, they've got something good. Stay tuned. Fireworks started a little after 3 in the morning when the Linus Tech Tips account was renamed to Tesla and started streaming a podcast-style recording of self-proclaimed techno king Elon Musk discussing cryptocurrency. This in and of itself is not a scam, but the streams linked to a scam website that claimed that for every 1 Bitcoin you sent, they would return double, complete with fake transaction records showing other users definitely getting huge payouts.
So this isn't the first time they've tried this approach. If you look back a little bit while ago, they went and did it with Twitter. They did a simple thing as well. It was, hey, if you send a Bitcoin here, we're going to give you more back. This is actually a lot more effort and quality went into this one. Hey, let's actually steal somebody's YouTube, live stream it, and then do the same thing. So they're upping their productivity. I'm sorry, they just went nuts. Like they upped their productivity and their quality of what they're doing to hit a bigger audience, right? It's a new take on a same approach. And I hope people are getting wise to this slowly but surely with Bitcoin and things like that. I think that message needs to be out there, that nobody's ever going to give you more back just because you send it to them, right? So educate people who do Bitcoin. Just tell your friends that will never ever happen. And most of the people who have Bitcoin, I would assume most are a bit tech savvy, hopefully. It should be very easy to tell them that this would never happen, right? You're never going to see this type of scenario.
Over the next couple of hours then, we sparred back and forth. First, I privated the streams, revoked the channel stream key, and attempted to reset the account credentials, only to realize, as I was investigating the source of the breach, that I had been completely outmaneuvered. They were back in, and the streams were live again. Okay, so I logged back in, nuked the stream again, and I go to, and they're up again. And now videos are being mass deleted from the channel. Over the next couple of hours, playing login whack-a-mole, the Linus Tech Tips, Tech Linked, and Tech Quickie accounts were each used to host these Elon Musk crypto streams until they were ultimately nuked by YouTube altogether for violating YouTube's terms of service.
So for me, this was about 3 in the afternoon my time, so I actually saw some of this during my normal day. One of the things that tipped me off something weird was going on is I think obviously he was trying to fix the name. Somebody must have changed the name because for a while there it went like LTT temp or something, right? And then when I saw the crypto stuff up there, I knew something odd was going on, very quickly for that. but obviously, you know, if you're an adversary, you're always going to target somebody when they're most vulnerable. In a small business such as this, the 3 a.m. makes the most sense, right? It's also the fact that if you're a global company, take for example, there is a public holiday coming up, or you're celebrating, let's say a very long festival like Ramadan, or 4th of July weekend in the U.S., or Chinese New Year where everybody's out celebrating. Look, that's a great time to target somebody and attack them for the fact that they're running very light staff most of the time during these periods. So that is something to think about and be vigilant about your staffing when you're most vulnerable, obviously. And it is unfortunate that they do target, you know, when everybody is trying to enjoy some time off with family and friends.
And I can almost feel your thoughts through the screen right now.
Linus, truly, after all these lectures about two-factor authentication, don't you even protect your own accounts?
Of course I do.
Yeah, come on, it's two-factor. I mean, he's done enough videos on it, and it's I would say somebody at his level has done enough understanding of this. He has enough people that work for him who have some, I would say, intermediary skills at cybersecurity. Probably not experts, but enough to know the common things that should be done. Plus, they've had sponsors for, I'm assuming, multi-factor providers and things over the years. So, yes, there would be no doubt in my mind his account had multi-factor, but that's just, there's other ways, obviously, right?
But while strong passwords and multi-factor authentication are very powerful security measures that you should use, they're not impenetrable. First up, let's talk 2FA. Not all factors or additional authentication elements are equally secure. The most common second factor, SMS, can be
Don't get me started, okay? SMS is the most awful two-factor there is on the planet, right? Don't even count it as two-factor. That's the easiest way to solve this problem. Somebody says, I have SMS, say, well, then you don't have two-factor. Just don't lie to yourself. Let's get that out the way first. Why is SMS not two-factor? Well, the easiest way I take this is when I'm talking to somebody, a senior person at a company, or let's just say a CISO. First thing I'm going to ask is really, really simple. What is your process if you need to reset your password today? Meaning you call your help desk, you've created a process, they validate who you are, and they work you through a password reset within your organization. And it is a process that you own, you've defined, and you can change based on whatever needs you have, right? But at least it's your process that you own. So that's the first question. And most people say, yeah, here's my process. Okay, cool. Now, next question I ask, who owns the phone number? Most people will answer our telco. So whatever their local telco is, they will tell them, hey, this is who owns it. I said, great. So you don't own the number. Number two, do you own the processes? Processes to call in and say, hey, I need to reset my password for whatever telco. It could be, it could be just, a lot of them have chat now on their websites as well, which is another problem. But the point is, speaking to a real person, you can social engineer them, and that's really what happens. And so you don't own the process, you don't own the number, and that's where this falls apart. This is a failure in your part if you are choosing to use SMS when you don't own it. So my request from everybody is just pretend like SMS is not two-factor. Just say it isn't two-factor, and that is the easiest way to solve this problem rather than continuing to make people think it is a valuable option when it is actually horrible.
Compromised by simple social engineering targeted at your phone carrier. Check out this video that we posted the last time our account was hijacked for more information about that.
There'll be a third time. No, hopefully not, but I mean, adversaries will change. This isn't just going to stop because 2 times, right?
Another common factor, notification-based multi-factor, is susceptible to fatigue attacks, where a perpetrator will constantly try to log in, hoping that you'll assume, oh, it's probably someone from work, or even just click on the notification by accident. It's very problematic, and I'm looking at you, Google, since you can't disable this factor on Google accounts.
That's interesting. That's an interesting take on it. Let's look at it from a different perspective. So what he's saying, think of it, this is how this goes down. You could be very busy, or you could be late at night. So let's just take the late at night example. You keep getting messages on your phone. So some people don't use screen time, don't turn off apps. So you get notifications coming in and you click the wrong one. a multi-factor over again, and you accidentally click allow or approve, whatever the thing is. That has been solved, I would say. So let me speak of Microsoft's Azure Authenticator app. That has been solved. The way it's been solved is now when you go to log into your, let's say your Office 365 email, once you get in there, if you have multi-factor set up with Azure, what's going to happen is the screen is going to put a number up there. Let's say this number is 21. Then on your mobile phone, you're going to get the notification pops up, and it's going to do a couple neat things if enabled correctly. Number one, it's going to show a geolocation of where that authentication coming in. It's good, but we all know that VPNs exist. But let's just assume that you're in Canada, like the LTT crew, and the notification comes in from somewhere in the Middle East or Europe or somewhere. You're going to see that authentication came in from a wrong place. Then the second thing is you're not going to know the number, because on the adversary or the hacker screen, they see the number. You're not going to see the number. So even if you try to click approve, there's nothing to approve. And the chances of guessing the number are, well, 0 to 99, right? Because it's normally only 2 digits. I've never seen 3, so I've never seen 0. Let's just assume 0 to 99, the chance of you guessing that right. So in reality, the only option you have as a user is to hit cancel. And when you hit cancel, it says report this, right? And then you can fire off automation in the background to do things, right? Interesting enough, this has happened to me, right? So, this came in, it came in from the US. It said this was being in the US. So I was like, that's definitely not me. I went and clicked cancel on it. I went and updated my password, and then I just pinged my manager on the side to say, hey, by the way, just changed my password. This came in. We have a lot of good processes. So sometimes managers will get notifications when when people's passwords have been changed and things like that. That's just a real story for me. It's happened to me. Now, I can't speak on Google's behalf, and that would be something that worth investigating and researching. What are they doing to tackle MFA fatigue? Is it something that only exists on the Google Enterprise accounts and not on the consumer? I'd start with that. Just top of my head, I would assume the enterprise side of the house is probably a little different and offers different features, and the consumer side of the house doesn't. And I'll look it up after this because has me curious now. I would believe that they would have this already, just different types of accounts being used, right? So,
even time-based two-factor, like Google Authenticator or Authy, can be compromised, say if you were to accidentally set it up or access it from an infected device. In spite of all of these issues with two-factor, though, it held the line last night. Our attacker not only never gained access to our additional authentication factors, they never even had our passwords.
Well, something else to take note of real fast is if you're using a vault-based solution to store your passwords, hopefully not LastPass, good Lord. If you're using some type of vault type application, some of them give the option to store the OTP in there as well. That is a bad idea. Don't put your password and your multi-factor stuff together. You should always use a minimum of separation, 2 apps, right? You could use, let's just say you have, I don't know, 1 password. Okay, I'm just gonna pick one out of the air. That's fine for your passwords, but then you should have other app or apps for your OTP multi-factor stuff. Give a really good example. Now I have a Synology, and so I use the Synology app for their multi-factor. If you have Ubiquiti, they offer their multi-factor app for Ubiquiti. And you can take it one step further. You're a gamer. If you have Blizzard, you would have their own app that they do their own thing. Now, there's always going to be lots of websites that don't have their own app, and things like that. You can just use trusted apps from the App Store, such as I use OTP Authy. That's one example. Or if you're really going down the security rabbit hole, you could put it in a YubiKeys app and store these inside of a YubiKey app where you have to tap the YubiKey with NFC to unlock it. So the point is, don't put them together because you're defeating the purpose. So you choose one for passwords and one for your app for your multi-factor. They should be separated at the end of the day.
But how can that be? Well, as it turns out, they didn't need any of that, which is a big part of why it took me so long to clue in and stop the spread. I was so focused on the potential damage that could be done by someone who had commandeered my SMS messages or gained access to my Google Authenticator somehow that I expended valuable time battening down the wrong hatches. if I had watched Theo Joe's recent video on the subject.
Don't know who Theo Joe is. Probably check it out after this. That's why I started this channel. But anyways, that's a big and important factor here, going after the wrong thing. One of the big kind of rules of cybersecurity will tell you is you should never do it alone. The reason behind that is ultimately, with experience, you're going to ping ideas off other people. Your idea might spawn another idea that they do some more threat hunting or analysis, and vice versa. So doing it alone, you kind of get stuck in your own feedback loop where you think your stuff is the most amazing because you never asked anybody else for, hey, am I going down the wrong path, or have you checked this already? Unfortunately, a small business can't do that, but very large enterprises do this, especially in their SOC, is they have the war room, or they're triaging everything. Multiple people are giving input and feedback to kind of sanity check yourself as well when you're dealing with a proper cyber incident, right?
Subject, or at least skimmed the comments, I could have probably stopped the bleeding in a matter of minutes. Shout out Theo Joe. But I didn't, so I got to be educated the hard way about a breed of attacks that bypass trivial things like passwords and 2FA entirely by targeting what's known as a session token.
No, yay.
Now, many of you will know this already, and if you do, give yourself a cookie.
It's a horrible dad joke. It's totally a dad joke. Oh my God. All right, it's fine. It's a dad joke.
But after you log into a website and your credentials have been validated, that site will provide your web browser with a session token. This allows your browser, and by extension you, to stay logged in when you restart your browser and go to access that site again.
It's that little checkbox that says, remember me. That's basically what is going to say, I want you to create a session token for me, that little checkbox. And that includes, even if you've gone through, here's my password, remember me, then you do your multi-factor, that's going to stay on there. In enterprises, though, there is always you can actually expire it. So I think the default for like Azure is like 14 days or something like that. So the users, no matter what, every 14 days will get re-prompted for it. So they can't have that checkbox forever. Consumer sites are a bit different, and unless you're like purging your browser, let's just say data, whatever's in your browser, whatever you've stored, if you're purging that, then you'll get re-prompted. But at the end of the day, for most enterprises and businesses, they should already have a process that says all multi-factor needs to be re-challenged maybe once every 14 days or once every 30 days. So if you think of it, once a month, 12 times a year, or once every 2 weeks, so we're looking at 24 times a year. That's not a very big inconvenience to the user to just refresh those things at the end of the day.
Again, this isn't a bad thing. It's a good thing, because realistically, nobody wants to type in a password every time they want to post a stupid thread on the internet. But hold on a second. That cookie is stored locally on your device. How would someone else get it? Well, that's where we made a mistake.
Copy paste.
Someone on our team, and I'm not saying it was Colton, downloaded what appeared to be a sponsorship offer from a potential partner. It was an innocent enough mistake for the most part. The email came from a legitimate looking source, and it didn't raise any immediate red flags like being full of grammatical errors. So they extracted the contents, launched what appeared to be a PDF containing the terms of the deal, then, presumably when it didn't work, went about the rest of their day.
So 2 parts to this one. This one's picking apart all the pieces he said there. Obviously, unless he comes out and properly releases the extracted file that caused this damage, which it would be technically unethical for him to post this publicly. I mean, if he was to give it to a research company or upload it to VirusTotal and things like that, that would be acceptable. But just giving it out like on, I don't know, like his forums or something, please, dear God, don't do that. You know what I mean? I'm sure they know that. I'm just going to say it, number one. Number 2, the takeaway from this is the grammatical errors. So while everybody's freaking out about ChatGPT, like, oh, security issues, oh my God, what bells went off in my head was, damn, now they can fix all their grammar, hopefully, right? I mean, if students are using it to write college papers and pass the bar and everything else, well, damn, now I can't tell these malicious emails from bad, piss poor grammar, or just me writing an email is probably the same. But that was my my moment with Chat GPT or Bing Chat now, that right there, right, the emails. The third thing he said, and I'm gonna take a stab at this because this is probably how it went down, if I guess. The email came in. He said he extracted it. Well, that tells me it was probably password protected, okay? And I'm thinking out loud here. This is why this is ridiculous. I love the people who password protect it and then send you an email with the password. That is the most ridiculous thing ever. And it is very easy to search emails and find this type of crap because it comes from the same source. So that is the most ridiculous. Somebody does that, you know, just tell them stop, okay? Number one. Number two, I would say why this probably went off. And this probably could have been mitigated greatly because you can't expect users to figure this stuff out. Assume they are going to get social engineered. Unfortunately, it's very easy. The issue I see with this was, why wasn't the attachment blocked, right? So the entry point needs to have a little bit of stricter controls. In theory, if an email has an attachment that is unable to be scanned, it should not be delivered. The user should get a message saying this email was dropped, we were unable to scan it. They can reach back to that person and say, hey, what happened with that email? Oh, I password protected this thing. Okay, yeah, we don't accept password protection at our company. You need to send it unencrypted. Two things behind that. Number one, let's talk about DLP and compliance. If you have really important compliance, then you need to be scanning these type of things that are coming in and out of your organization. So those type of attachments, really, it's not very common in a large enterprise to allow unscanned attachments in and out. You just zip up, I don't know, a bunch of credit card numbers and send it out. That's right. See what I'm saying? That's just, then they can't scan it. The other side of this coin is, if you have a solution like Office 365 Defender, let's take that as a really good example. It does a couple things for you. Number one, the big one is it scans attachments, and then it takes the attachment, and if it thinks something's weird about it, right, it will go and detonate it. And when it detonates it, it tries to open that in a isolated environment to see what the hell happens, and then say, oh, wow, you opened this PDF file or this, OneNote recently had vulnerability in it. And as soon as they opened it up, it went nuts. And so that would be my thing there, I would say, is maybe start looking at the email security and saying, look, if we can't scan it, we don't want to accept it. That is your first line of defense. It shouldn't be able to come all the way to the inbox without some type of scanning mechanism before a human being can open it, right?
Happened in the background took place over the course of just 30 seconds.
Yep.
The malware accessed all user data from both of their installed browsers, Chrome and Edge, including everything from locally saved passwords to cookies to browser preferences, giving them effectively an exact copy of those browsers on the target machine that they could export.
Not shocked, not surprised. This is a Tuesday. A Tuesday for hackers. It is just built into their toolkits and their rootkits. It's all automated. It is a known, right?
Including, that's right, session tokens for every logged in website. Now, no one should unzip an email attachment. File extensions should always be double checked when you're executing anything, and any file that doesn't do what you expect should raise immediate red flags.
As I said, nobody should unzip an attachment that hasn't been scanned. I would put a little appendix star on that one.
But then, on the flip side, I can hardly blame a sales rep or a video editor or someone in accounting for not being up on the latest in cybercrime. And I also believe that in a healthy organization, actually rolls up the hill rather than down.
Two good points, and something as an organization should always do within their cybersecurity training is make sure employees know that security is everybody's responsibility. Security is everyone's responsibility. That's the phrase, okay? You have to make sure people know they can't get fired. Different cultures, it's a nightmare. Different cultures take these things differently. Different countries that I've worked in take these things differently. To be honest, I had to chastise a very senior person because he was berating an employee saying, how do you know? How did you let this happen? And I said, look, I don't think that's right. In theory, I could social engineer you if you want me to teach you a lesson. The point is we don't point fingers in an incident. So making sure the employees understand that the first action isn't they're going to be fired. That's what I think a lot of people worry about. Number two, when you are having these conversations, just make it part of your corporate policy. You want people to have an open door cybersecurity policy to say, look, if you're not sure, just unplug your computer, close it, the lid if it's a laptop, or unplug it from the network. Tell them not to turn it off. Just disconnect it from the network, whatever it takes. If you have a physical button to turn off the Wi-Fi on a laptop, or you just need to disable the Windows Wi-Fi, whatever. The reason I say don't turn off the computer, because if you need to do forensics on it, you want to capture what's running in memory, right? My point is, get the policy, tell users this is what we'd like you to do. It's better to err on the side of caution. Maybe it was nothing and they did this anyways, and that they're not going to be punished for it. I think most people can agree that's common sense. However, include it in your cybersecurity training, include it in your company policy, and just make sure it's reminded on a regular cadence that you're empowered to help the business, but you're not going to be punished for it ultimately, unless I lift up my keyboard and say, oh, well, what the hell is this? Is that your password? Come on now, that's a little different, right?
So there's not going to be any disciplinary actions, because the simple truth is that if we had more rigorous training for our newcomers and better processes for following up notifications from our site-wide anti-malware, this could have been easily avoided.
I'm going to go with maybe. Okay. Won't use the word easy. Use the word easy. Number one, I like to use my numbers just so y'all know. Number one, the first thing he said there was newcomers. Everybody needs it on a regular cadence, not just, oh, I've been there 10 years, I know what I'm doing, right? Everybody, so not just newcomers. Yes, newcomers should be vetted and tested maybe a little bit as well, where just because you've been there for a while doesn't mean you're exempt from training and just new attacks. As he said, that impacts somebody who can be doing this for 10 years. It doesn't matter. Reevaluating their processes. Yes, definitely. But more importantly, the AV side of the house. There's a good chance AV wouldn't have stopped this, right? It depends, right? You can evade AVs. There's stuff specifically written to evade an AV, right? Especially if you're being APT'd and you're being targeted, they would maybe know what version of AV you're running, what solution, and how they want to circumvent that. So I wouldn't use the word AV. What I would say is, if they had an EDR or XDR solution, they would have stood a better chance of this, of mitigating the damage, right? Or even getting a notification. So simple as this. If you have antivirus, you have a seatbelt in a car. It's been there for decades, and it is the bare minimum, right? But nowadays we have car accidents. We have, we have everything now. Airbags is a big thing. No, not just front, but side and rear airbags, right? We even have a lot of stuff now where it will brake and try to slow down the car to avoid an accident. So we're going into accident avoidance while improving the if an accident happens. So that's what the EDR XDR is. AV is a seatbelt. EDR XDR is all these new features such as beeping when the people are changing lanes or coming in your lane, looking at blind spots, braking for you automatically to slow it down, and just better safety within the within the airbags and stuff like that. Not just AV, EDR, right?
As for why it took so long for us to lock down the account once we knew what was going on, that's another training issue, but this time it was my training.
Didn't know how to
We use a
expire the
system
session.
for our YouTube channels called Content Manager, which theoretically improves security by allowing us to dole out specific channel access roles to our various team members, rather than just sharing the main account credentials with everyone who needs to access it.
Right.
This made the process of determining the attack vector way more complicated. You could think of it kind of like replacing your one giant vault door with 20 smaller doors, any one of which realistically still gets you into the vault. Now, in a perfect world, these smaller doors should have been restricted with less access than we configured, but hindsight is 2020.
Don't agree with that. So instead of having 20 doors, you shouldn't have 20 doors. In theory, the way I would recommend this would be you should try to get as close back down to one door. And that one door now has a bouncer, right? So you have you have to get through the bouncer to get through the front door. The more doors you have, the more bouncers you need, obviously, right? So that's the way to think about it. If you just have a door and you have multiple doors, you need multiple bouncers. It gets expensive, it gets complicated. The content manager, ultimately, the way I would handle it if I had a lot of people is we use the ATM example. I'm sure everybody's been to an ATM machine and just set out of order. And then you walk a couple more blocks and there's another ATM. So any issue with an ATM, the number one rule is just, who cares what the issue is, turn it off. It could be it's eating cards, it could be connectivity issue, it could be software issue, it could be just spitting out the wrong money, it could be empty. It doesn't matter, turn it off. So in this scenario, if he had 20 people who had any type of permission, I'd have went through and just revoked all of them instantly like that. Is it going to cause any issues? Maybe somebody just can't upload a video, but it's better to stop the bleeding. So I would have stripped everybody out and I would have left just one account. That one account would have been, there'd have been a challenge. Obviously, I don't know Google's situation or scenario. I probably would have spun up a brand new Gmail account quickly, added it in there, and disabled every account for the time being, and then figure out how to, obviously, as you said, the process. What is the process to revoke your session tokens? If you take Azure, for example, the way it's recommended for Azure AD is you disable the account, then you whack the sessions, because the sessions, even if you kill all the session tokens in Azure, and people have to come back in, sometimes it could take an hour or more. So the advice is disable the account, kill the token, double reset password if it's on-premise account, and then re-enable the account after some time. Content manager, obviously don't know the ins and outs, but that would be my approach. Is one, reduce how many people are there. Two, if you get into a bad situation, the plan is set up a new Gmail account that nobody knows about, that's never been used, add that one to content manager, and then remove everybody else out of there, and that'd probably be the fastest way to do that, right?
Or at least I hope it is. The bottom line is that our disaster response processes need to improve, because I realized at 3 whatever in the morning, shout out Steve from Gamers Nexus for the wake up call, by the way, that I actually didn't know how to reset the
Does Steve sleep? That's hilarious. I guess that dude doesn't sleep either.
passwords and the access control across all of these channels in Channel Manager. And that is not the sort of thing that you want to be troubleshooting butt naked in the wee hours of the morning in the middle of a crisis. In fairness to me, the way that Google handles the intermingling of all their services is not the most intuitive, and both Yvonne and I experienced numerous glitches and timeouts that prevented us from effectively using these tools, even once we did figure out how to use them.
This is always going to be a problem. Let me explain why. Consumer product, enterprise product. That's where it's going to be a headache. When it's a consumer product, it needs to cater for anybody, anytime, anywhere, right? You should be able to get to your email from anywhere on this planet. Otherwise, that solution isn't viable for consumers. And that being the case, the controls aren't going to be there. Enterprises will get all the amazing security features added in. And that's really the issue here. I think if you have to ask yourself from a Google perspective, YouTube is still a consumer product, and maybe it's just blown up too fast where they haven't bolted in the enterprise features that most likely exist in Google Workspace or Google Enterprise, whatever they're calling it today. Maybe the fix for this is for larger channels who have capital or money and they want to mitigate this. Maybe they could pay for a enterprise type account that gives them tons of features to manage this better. That would probably be the happy medium. Yes, you can get better security, but it comes at a bit of a cost. Nothing breaking the bank, but something like that. And then people who have a small channel where it's just one person, they might not say, hey, at this time I don't need to invest in that. I can just manage my own account. So maybe that's the answer here, is to work with Google and say, well, can we pay for enterprise type features for larger channels who can afford the capital and do have a lot of accounts to manage versus a small channel? I think that option would be a good way to maybe solve the problem, right?
Which leads us nicely then into the next part of our discussion. I've owned what I did wrong, and now it's time to talk about Google. To their credit, I heard back that someone was aware and working on it at the highest levels within about half an hour of reaching out to my YouTube rep. And
timing.
they have seemingly improved their internal tools for managing this sort of thing a lot since the last time around. They've got forms you can fill out, and the partner reps that we've worked with seem to genuinely care. Shout out MC, I'm so sorry this spoiled your spa day. However, this entire process has been pretty opaque. Other than we're aware and working on it, the internal team doesn't seem to even be allowed to communicate with creators directly. I mean, I get it. Security aside, idiot users probably won't have anything to contribute to their investigation. They figured out that the attack came from one of our non-video production teams pretty quickly and then actually banned that Google Workspace account almost immediately. I mean, realistically, idiot users could just slow them down, but even a quick, hey, I know you're stressed, here's what's going on, and here's how we can keep this from spreading, would almost certainly have calmed my nerves and saved all of us some work by keeping TechLinked and TechQuickie in our hands.
Look, those are all fair things. I think at the end of the day, whenever somebody calls a larger company for incident response, take Microsoft Dart as an example. We have 24/7 incident response managers. It gets escalated to them very quickly. They assess what's going on. And reality of it is, yes, there are scenarios where it isn't really a breach. And we've seen it where somebody was running their own red team testing without telling somebody and all the alarms went off, right? There is a real scenario there. And then trying to activate resources. Most companies do keep, that are incident response companies, do keep enough staff in place. In reality, in the world, there's not many companies that can service the entire world. There might be some amazing ones in one country. I'm assuming he could find maybe some company in his country that only does one or two countries. Microsoft is a global company, and so they can actually do business everywhere. The other one, which obviously I have a lot of friends that work at this, and we all respect each other in the industry, would be Mandiant, recently bought by Google. And it's a similar process over there. You're going to get a real human being. But once again, these are enterprise companies, and they have the money and the capital to do that. I don't think his request is unreasonable, but at the same time, my original point of it is a consumer-based product. Yes, he built a business on a consumer-based platform, and that's probably the thing that needs to be addressed is if you are running a business on there, my question would be, could you pay for a business-based back end for YouTube? I don't know, obviously. My channel is going to be super small, just me, myself, and I, sadly. But that's it. That would be it. It's a consumer-based product, and this is going to continue to come up. Right.
And another big problem is that this approach, one-on-one, only benefits larger channels like ours. I've seen quite a few people, rightly, express some resentment that we were able to get this resolved so quickly when their favorite niche creator X or Y struggled with it for an extended period of time or even never got it fully resolved. So it's clear that there are some changes that need to be made, and here are a few of them in no particular order.
Let's hear them.
We need greater security options for key channel attributes. I mean, how can you change the name of a channel without having to re-enter your password and your two-factor? What about resetting a stream key? Same deal in my opinion. And this is just one of the ways that the impact of a session hijacking can be limited.
Those are really good ideas that have existed for a very long time, right? Let's take a really easy example I think most people would understand. If you own a website, you have a registrar where you've registered the site for. I remember, I guarantee it hasn't changed, but I sold a domain name years ago. And in order to sell that domain name, you had to do something, and then you had to wait a period of time. So if an adversary was to get into your domain name and try to sell it off or steal it or take it, it just couldn't be transferred easy because on average, changing a domain name isn't something you do overnight. If you purchase a company or acquire a company or divesting a company, that's something that takes a little while to happen. I'm assuming he had the same thing when they bought Floatplane. I remember watching that video talking about that. that's an example of a time delayed thing on an action that is very, very rare. So let's take, for example, his example of changing the name. That's a very fair thing. I would assume not just adding in the ability to challenge another factor. It should also be a time delay in there, because the amount of people who are renaming channels are probably extremely small. You could limit how long it will take before that processes, because most people say, oh, I need to rename my channel at this very moment, is probably very rare, and it would reduce this type of thing. That's an example. And obviously other situations in there where maybe the streaming key would be something you would do that instantaneously. So you could find a middle ground for which things rarely need to happen, put a time delay, and things that you need instantaneously, like a new streaming key. Maybe your stream bonked out and you want a new one. You should be able to do that, but multi-layers of challenging in that moment, right?
Rate limiting is also widely used in API access to services like YouTube. For example, Google will only process a certain number of comment moderation actions per day through their API. Well, I could see implementing something similar, even if you are directly accessing the service, but then rather than limit it outright, it could prompt for authentication. To be clear, I'm not saying every time you delete a video, it should ask for your password, but say if you were trying to delete 10 or 100 or 1,000 videos at a time, a little, are you sure about that? Are you actually
rate
you?
Limiting, yeah,
would
so
probably
some type of
be
rate
in order.
limiting would help.
The funny thing is that none of that
happens with,
stuff
like,
would even be
databases, like,
necessary
no
with
one's gonna
proper
delete 1,000
security
records.
policies on session tokens. The bare minimum would be time-based expiry. You know how when you boot up an old smartphone, all your accounts are usually logged out? Session expiry. But many sites also factor in other attributes, like location. So if you were to suddenly try to access a site or service from Antarctica, you should be prompted to log in again. These measures are very common on high-risk websites, like online banking. I'm not saying banks are model citizens when it comes to login security, but they do usually invalidate sessions in a matter of minutes.
Yeah, that's a little different situation. They typically there really is no check my remember me box. I'd be very surprised to find a bank who does that. They feel the inconvenience to the user is much cheaper than paying out the cost of stolen credentials to access bank accounts, right? And even put my stuff out there in my bank, if I get into it, certain actions require a second authentication, as he was discussing. If I wanted to add transferring to somebody else's account or setting up a reoccurring payment, something like that, you're going to get challenged multi-factor to do that action. That's a fair thing. However, to his point, the geofencing stuff kind of works, but it doesn't in a consumer world versus an enterprise world. What he's talking about would be UEBA, User Behavior Entity Analytics, right? That's the term, where you build a profile of your user. It typically takes about 30 days max of what is this user? How do they work? Where do they normally log in from? What computers are they using? What mobile phones are they using? What hours do they typically do the bulk of their work? So all those things factor into a risk score of a user themselves. It's an enterprise-based feature, though. This is a consumer product, and I guarantee they have probably some data on this, but taking action on it would be very difficult, because if it's a channel with one person and that's it, and you arbitrarily lock it out, mistakes like that will happen. It could go both ways. Just because he's a larger channel, this is where that challenge is going to come in, versus we could pay for something that might give us enhanced security features we need because of the way we do business. But enterprise solutions have this already. It's actually uncommon to see people not using user behavior analytics, UEBA, within their environment this day and age, just to keep up with it's machine learning and stuff like that, to keep up with it. When you have 10,000 employees or 20,000 employees, there's no way to know what the hell they do and how they work. You need machine learning and AI to fill that gap and constantly reevaluate the way and how somebody is working on average. So,
But can you remember the last time Instagram or Snapchat asked you to log in again? Social media platforms, YouTube, excuse me, tend to be a lot less aggressive since they want to make using their platforms as frictionless as possible.
Consumer-based.
Now, in fairness, Google does usually require re-authentication when you're changing a password or other security options, or, I don't know, when a session token gets reused by a new IP address on the other side of the freaking planet. But we've heard from multiple people that this isn't always the case. So the big question
if they
is
stole
that
it in Canada,
with
I
Google
would just
owning the
VPN in
whole
and
chain
use it
here,
from Canada.
like start to finish, really, including the bloody web browser, how is this crap not only still possible, but so prevalent? It's time for them to not just ask these questions internally, but come up with real answers for them. I think the only group whose response here was perfect was our community. And no, this is not like standing on stage, yeah, I love you guys, and what. You guys were amazing. Prominent members of our forum, whom I've interacted with over the years, reached out to my team directly. Upstanding citizens were paying real money out of their own pockets to send super chats warning stream viewers that the channel was hijacked. And over 5,000 of you in the last 12 hours alone subscribed to floatplane.com to show your support and to ensure that you wouldn't miss any of our uploads. I have had a...
Should I do Floatplane? I'm just curious. I don't know. Maybe I'll mess around with it. I think that's very good. I mean, as I started this video, one of the big things with cybersecurity is it's a community-based thing. Sharing telemetry with each other is really the only way you can build a proper defense. I mean, if we take the real world, governments share details about risks and threats that are going on, and in US shares with Europe, Europe shares with US, Germany shares with people. Countries do this in the real world, right? With real threats and real people. It makes sense to do that in the cyber world. The challenge with it is people, we kind of did it to ourselves as IT. Sometimes you don't know what is being taken off a computer or how anonymized that data is, and then I send my data to somebody else. I think advertisers have screwed everybody because they just take everything and there's no anonymization there. But you have to find somebody you trust and a solution you trust, and that solution itself will hopefully help, because other people who are using that solution should all be feeding in. The way I like to look at it is, let's say there's 10 companies and they all use the same solution. It's a cloud-based system. One time I get a malicious email that comes in, and maybe I lose a couple computers due to ransomware. As soon as I get ransomware, everybody else gets notified that if you see this, block it, not just in my company, but in their companies. If that email was coming in, or that whatever that is that's doing the ransomware, it's blocked, and so they never get hit with it. And then 3 months later, another company within the 10 gets hit. Maybe they lose 10 computers with a ransomware attack, but my company's fine, because maybe I get that email an hour later, comes to me, but however, we already know about it and it's being blocked. So that crowdsourced sharing of it is important. I would also say, from a community perspective, I hope that he refunds those super chats. I think that'd be the right thing to do for anybody who did it. That's just me thinking out loud. They did the right thing. It came at a cost, right? I do think, though, refunding it would be just a noble action to those people. They don't need, obviously you could say, hey, take their names down and add a shirt next time they purchase something during the WAN show, if they were those people, and make a special shirt saying I helped LTT or something crazy. I don't know. That's marketing. That's out of my game. I don't know that stuff, but that's it. Maybe a refund for the people who did that would be fair. I'm sure there's a way to know how to do that. You know what I mean?
Pretty rough day, a pretty long day. But you know what? It's also been amazing to see how
Lucky
fast
it's only
we can
one
bounce
day.
back, thanks to your unwavering support, the incredible team we have here. Everyone.
One day.
Are you over there? Is Colton still there?
I mean, it's a bad one day
No?
for everybody.
All
It doesn't
right, well,
matter.
whatever.
One day, 1 hour.
Andrew's
it's
there.
still the
James
same,
is working
but
on guidance for this. Luke was up half the night with me and Yvonne trying to help us figure things out, driving to the office. Really appreciate you all. Our partners at YouTube. And of course, D-Brand. Something, D-Brand with me a lot, yes.
All right, I watched the first sponsor one. I'm going to skip the second one when you talked about it. Look, here's the thing. A couple things that need to be really thought about here, and this is what I would say. Number one, I'm just going to take a stab in the dark, and I'm assuming they kind of run their computers as their each person's computer. There isn't really a form of security enforcement on their endpoints beyond maybe some solution that they got for free through a sponsorship or something, and they've never actually went out to the market and said, we're a large company, we're getting to be we're a small company, we're not large yet, but is there a different solution we should be purchasing that gives us more bells and whistles that we need to maybe pay for because we are a very public-based company, maybe just because it's YouTube. Not that every company is not public, but that's for every company to decide. The first part, if you take away from this, is just better endpoint security. You can't expect the user to know this. He knows that. 2, identity. Definitely better identity security all around. Conditional access and things like that will help mitigate a lot of these things, or the automation just disables the account right away. It's better to disable the account. And if this happened at 3 a.m., he would have woke up and been like, oh, somebody's account was disabled. Cool, let's go look into it in the morning time, right? Goes back to that ATM example, right? Then you have identity, you have endpoint. The email obviously came in through email, better email security. If it can't be scanned, then it doesn't get delivered. End of discussion. I mean, let me give an example in the real world. If somebody gave you a package and they can't scan the package, you think they're going to mail the box? No. I mean, okay, yes, we need to translate the physical world into the real world, and it ends up making more sense. Like, oh, that's just freaking logical. Okay, cool. Then the last thing, and probably the most important thing, and I probably should have said this first, is the fact of processes. Here's what I hope doesn't happen, but it's very, very common. The fire's out, then you're still smoldering a little bit. And then the smoldering turns into just hot coals. And then the hot coals eventually go out, and then it gets forgotten about. And everybody was like, hey, we need to fix this. And then business goes back to normal. People forget that it happened. We definitely have a short-term memory in cybersecurity. And that would be really where I would say is how do you take this initiative, and how do you do a culture change within the company? And the processes can't be evaluated one time. It needs to be reevaluated, and training needs to happen. And this is where it gets expensive, ultimately. It's time consuming, it's expensive. Smaller companies cannot afford a SOC. They can't afford a 3-tier SOC with 24/7 support. So you have to pick your battles and how you want to solve that within the capital and the funding that you have to do that. But that's it. How do you keep the initiative going in especially a small business? And you also run the risk of you're going to add this role or these job duties onto somebody else who's not specialized in it. I mean, that in itself a problem. If you take a SOC, you ask a network person to try to secure identities, which is my expertise, they're not going to have a freaking clue what to do. If you ask me to do the best security on a network, I'm going to say, man, it's not my area. Right. And so we all have our specialties. And so that's why it's expensive for companies, because you need to be diverse enough. You need application security. You need database security. You need email security. You need people who can investigate these different things, network security at the end of the day. And that's it. So I'm going to leave it at that. I think this is a good lesson for everybody. As he said, hindsight, watching other people's videos. Who knows where this goes? I thought this would just be an interesting video for me to start with my channel. Not that I'm trying to punch up or belittle anybody. I think it's a matter of my own fault for not creating content earlier. And maybe this message will find somebody else and find some other channel of things that they can do before this actually happens. Reduce the amount of people who can do it. One last thing I'd probably leave it with is let's change your process. Maybe go to a very extreme process for the time being, where only one person or 2 people are allowed to upload, and you can only upload from a specific computer in the office. One, that means you're not opening emails on there, you're not browsing the internet, you're not doing whatever the hell game you're playing. That computer literally is only designed to log in and go to the website and upload the YouTube video, and only 1 or 2 people are actually allowed to use those computers. That would be a temporary solution to that. Obviously, that's a change in workflow, because if you have 20 people who upload videos versus now you only have 2, there could be some delays. But at least that might be a way to say, okay, this is the most extreme process we can have. What is the middle ground that we need to function as a company to do this? And what risk are we willing to accept? And what risk do we want to mitigate, finding other ways to do that or other solutions? So that's what I would leave them with. So, yep, thanks.